story, and then Robbie Wrist was cast as the voice of Mikey. So the guy inside the suit was just doing the martial arts and the stunts, but Robbie Wrist was the actual voice actor who voiced Michelangelo. Now, the actor in the Raphael suit also had an interesting story to tell. Mr. Josh Pice, he remembered the intense body cast experience when they had to cast a suit around his body. They actually gave him 2 straws to breathe through by poking the straws up his nose as he was completely covered in the plaster. And he was actually told later that they kept him in the plaster longer than needed just to see if he would freak out or not. And it's worth noting that Josh also voiced Raphael. And then we had the actor who was in the Donatello suit, Leif Tilden. Now, he recalls being in the audition, sitting in an office surrounded by movie props. He recalls seeing Falco's head from the Neverending Story in one corner and a Yoda puppet in the other. And he absolutely loved it, and it's one of his fondest memories from any audition he's ever done. And the actor who played Leonardo, David Foreman, He didn't really have an interesting interview story, but it is worth noting that he actually played a Fug in the movie, as well as a Ninja Turtle. In fact, all the Turtle actors had cameos. The guy who played Mikey played the pizza delivery guy at the beginning of the film. Donatello actor played a foot member, and the actor who played Raphael was the passenger in the taxi seen after Raphael and Casey Jones have the fight in the park. Leonardo was voiced by Brian Tukey. I think that's how you pronounce that name. And then we get to the Splinter puppet that was operated by Kevin Clash. It was an advanced hand puppet, and Kevin wasn't actually in the suit, he was more or less underneath it, away from the camera, and Kevin also voiced Splinter. The actors had a hard time in these costumes. It did get very hot and claustrophobic with all the electronics in the suits, and on occasion the heads would have to be torn off to cool the actors down and let them breathe and drink fluids. Occasionally sickness was unavoidable. The heads would be glued on to seem seamless, and sometimes they would malfunction and the actors would be trapped inside for sometimes hours, and on occasion they would absolutely freak out and shout for the crew members to just come and rip the heads off. Now, the actor who played Raphael commented how everything that could possibly go wrong with the suits went wrong. He also said that the suit helped him play the character of Raphael better, who was a very frustrated and angry, violent turtle, and the actor actually said that the suit made him feel exactly the same way. And of course, we also had the following actors playing these parts. April O'Neil was played by Judith Hogue, Casey Jones played by Elias Cortez, and Shredder played by James Saito. And Sam Rockwell also appeared in the movie in a very small role as a Foot Clan Fug. Just a little bit of trivia there for you. And of course, Sam Rockwell went on to much bigger things in his film career. He's in a lot of good movies these days. It is also worth mentioning that Jim Henson, he was around on occasion, but not constantly. And sadly, Jim Henson passed away shortly before the film was released. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie was Jim Henson's last project. The movie's shooting locations and set designs were all throwbacks to that original comic book. And some set pieces of streets and rooftop scenes looked almost identical to the pages from the comic book. And especially the sewer layer the turtles lived in looked a dirty, disgusting place to live, as it would do, after all, if it was a real sewer. The film needed to be sped up in certain scenes involving the turtles to make the movements look a little bit more fluid and convincing, especially the fight scenes. Because, as you can imagine, for these actors in these suits doing these stunts, the movements were probably slowed down considerably because of the sheer weight and clumsiness of the suits, so probably speeding the camera up just helped it look that little bit more natural. And of course, the tone of the film was very dark, and the actual sets were shot in the shadows, in dark surroundings, which actually did the film wonders. But in test screenings, some said it was too dark and needed to be brighter for a kid-friendly show. But these notes were ignored, and, thank goodness they were ignored. But sadly, for some reason, towards the end of the film, Steve was forced to leave the project, and 2 other editors would come in and finish the movie in post-production. But I think it's safe to say that Steve's vision on his project is still intact in the film, and it is his movie. It's no one else's, it's Steve's movie. Now, the film needed to be heavily edited for its UK release, once again just like the cartoons, and once again it was down to Mikey's weapon of choice, the nunchucks. Like I said, when I was a kid, my VHS was worn out, but little did I know that I was watching an edited version with parts missing. It was only when I purchased the DVD in later years did I see the film in its full glory. But it wasn't only Michelangelo scenes that were dropped from the movie. Let me just talk you through a few of the scenes that were cut initially from the UK release. Now, you remember the scene after Raphael gets beat up on the rooftop and he's thrown through the skylight, and then all the Foot Clan members come down after him, and then Michelangelo and one of the other Foot members start having a nunchuck competition on who's more skilled. And, you know, they're all spinning the nunchucks around, then Michelangelo spins his nunchucks around, and it ends with him spinning it round on his finger and he wins the competition. That bit was completely cut out of my version of the VHS tape, so it was quite nice to actually see that in the DVD release. It's a really good scene. The bit where Splinter throws Shredder over the rooftop, then momentarily holds him before Shredder throws his dagger at Splinter and forced to drop him. Well, that scene was cut out of my VHS tape as well. What you actually saw was Shredder running at Splinter, and then Splinter wraps well, actually, you didn't even see the nunchuck. You just kind of see this quick movement, and then you see Shredder flip over the building, and then you just see him straight away just drop. You don't see Splinter holding him and doing his little speech. You just see Shredder just drop straight away down to the garbage truck. And then there was a scene back in April's apartment. I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place here. I should have done this in order, but I've done it this way now. The scene where they're in April's apartment and the Foot Clan members have come in just after Michelangelo has the nunchuck competition. There's a scene where the Foot are trying to hack away at Michelangelo with the axes, and Michelangelo's just spinning around on his back, and he comments on the Wheel of Fortune joke. That bit wasn't in my VHS copy either in the UK. That was very annoying, not that I knew about it at the time. And then there's the bit in the farmhouse where Michelangelo comes in from training, and I think a lot of those training clips were also missing from my VHS release because obviously they were using some of the weapons that weren't allowed to be shown on screen. And there's also a scene where Michelangelo comes into the farmhouse after training, and he's got sore muscles, and he grabs the turtle wax out of the cupboard, and it's quite a funny scene, but I don't remember that being in the VHS copy when I was a kid either. And I believe, I may be mistaken, but I believe that the German release had the same edited version as the UK release as well. But saying all that, strangely enough, the title of the movie kept the word ninja in it, unlike the cartoon. Unlike Masters of the Universe, the Ninja Turtles movie was a massive success, and as I said, it made a massive $201 million worldwide, and I'm sure you agree that is not a bad profit at all for a movie that was made with only a $13 million budget. Now, as good as this movie was, there are a few goofs and a few movie mistakes. There were a few times in the movie where the actors and the suits can actually be seen. One particular goof happens in the scene where Leo and Raphael are sharing a hug after Raphael has been beaten up on the rooftop and they've escaped to the farmhouse, and he finally wakes up from his coma. You remember the scene where they're sharing the hug? Well, Donatello comes in and starts poking fun, and he starts laughing and tilting his head back, and as he does so, you can actually see straight down the turtle's mouth, and you can see the actual actor's mouth inside the actual turtle head, and it looks quite disturbing to see two sets of teeth, the turtle's teeth and the actor's teeth, coming out of the head. On the full screen version of the movie, there are a few goofs that can be easily spotted if you look for them. In particular, the end rooftop scene where Shredder runs at Splinter with the spear. You can clearly see the top of the set in the shot, and also when the camera cuts to a close-up of Splinter, the puppeteer can clearly be seen on screen. Also, the cameras around the set can clearly be seen in shot. However, this was resolved with the release of the widescreen edition, which cut out all these imperfections in the scene and made them unseeable. And there's also the scene where the turtles are leaving April's apartment for the first time, and it can clearly be seen that Leonardo's swords are made from rubber props as they get caught on the wall and bend quite easily. Also, the scene where Raphael gets thrown through the skylight and crashes down in the apartment below. When the turtles go to check on him, you can see that the shell is clearly made of a sponge-like material. And there's a scene where Donatello is skateboarding at the start of the movie through the sewers, and for a split second, if you pause the movie, you can actually see a human hand in the shot. The actor must have left the puppet's glove off because he didn't expect for his hand to be seen in the shot. Probably just expected to see the legs and the skateboard. In one scene, Raphael sends a foot soldier flying into a ladder headfirst. But if you watch closely, if you slow it up, you can see that he never actually hits the ladder with his head. He's actually miles away from the ladder. You don't have to slow it down. You can just see it in the shot. The best mistake is seen when Leo and Raph are arguing in April's apartment. And as the camera moves back, you can see a member of the crew in the background trying to stay out of shot but failing miserably. He was probably controlling the puppetry, but I don't know how this was missed because he can clearly just be seen in the background. It's just a guy in a red cap just knelt down in the background of the movie. He has no right whatsoever to be in that scene, but there he is. Always notice him on that scene. I can't not notice that. Even with all these mistakes, the movie is still brilliant. There's no denying that. It is the best version, in my opinion, of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles we have ever had. Oh, there is one more mistake that I think I should tell you about, which will actually take us nicely into the deleted scenes. Right, there's a scene at the farmhouse where the turtles are training. They really miss Master Splinter, and at one point you can see Raphael shouting Splinter's name into the night whilst he's stood on top of a barn. Okay, I'm sure you all remember that scene, but if you look closely, even though the scene is shot in the dark, you can clearly see that the actual turtle is not Raphael, it's actually Michelangelo, and Raphael's voice has kind of been dubbed over it. But why? Well, apparently there was a deleted scene that showed Mikey having a dark moment, hiding away on his own, taking his frustrations out on a punching bag in the barn. And the scene on the barn was probably a continuation of this scene that was cut. And originally Mikey was supposed to scream Splinter's name, but due to the previous scene being dropped, they probably felt it was more appropriate to have Raphael scream the line, and so they probably turned down the contrast and the brightness of the scene and just hoped that no one realised that it was actually Michelangelo stood on the barn roof and not Raphael. And then there is a very good deleted scene which shows Shredder kneeling as his Foot Clan members all surround him, and then they all attack him at once, and Shredder easily beats all of them without even getting up. He's still kneeling down as he defeats all of the Foot Clan. I think this was a great scene. I don't know how they didn't leave this in the movie. It was probably deemed a little bit too violent maybe, but it was an excellent clip which I think should be put back into the movie for the fans. And then there's a deleted scene which would have probably played at the end of the movie where you see April and Danny sat in an office trying to pitch a comic book of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to a guy who seems to be in charge of Mirage Studios, which is funny because Mirage Studios is actually Kevin and Peter's creation when they created the first comic book. So in the movie you've got the head of Mirage Studios, which is quite funny, and he turns around to April and Danny and says, "I'm sorry, it's just a little bit too far-fetched." Now, at the same time, in the window behind him, you can see all four of the turtles poke their heads out from the corners of the windows, and they're listening into the pitch. And when Mikey hears that, he says it's far-fetched. In disbelief, he falls from the window and falls down. And then the camera goes to the outside of the window where Mikey's holding onto the ledge, and he turns to the camera and he says, "Far-fetched," in disagreement. And it was actually quite funny because this is the struggles that they had trying to get this movie made, trying to get the toy line made, and trying to get the cartoon made. These are all the little road bumps that they hit into where no one thought it was a great idea. They just all thought it was ridiculous. And I quite like that they made a joke out of that for the movie. Unfortunately, it was cut, and this clip does seem very rough, but I'd love to see it included back into the movie one day, just with the Shredder fight scene as well, where the Foot Clan members surround him. I'd like to see that back in as well. I'd love to see some kind of ultimate cut of the movie. That would be fantastic. So the first movie was released. It did very well. So of course a sequel was already greenlit and it was in the works. But in between the first movie and the second movie being released, Turtle fans were treated to a live musical tour featuring the Turtles and friends. The tour was called the Coming Out of Their Shells Tour, and it all started on August the 17th, 1990, and the first show was broadcast on pay-per-view. The band featured Leo on guitar, Donnie on keys, Mikey on guitar and lead vocals, and Raphael on drums, saxophone and vocals. Splinter, April and Shredder would also sing a few songs. The show, which was sponsored by Pizza Hut, would have the Turtles performing on stage for their fans whilst the Shredder and Baxter Stockman tried to ruin the fun. The tour also released an album as well as home VHS tapes. Now, The Tour isn't considered a particularly good show, and to be honest, I have no memory of it. I think it was just in the US. I don't remember this at all. But as bad as this show seems to us now, I'm sure as a kid, whoever saw it back in the day would have absolutely loved it, and I have fond memories of it. The costumes also were not particularly good. Then again, like I just said, this was for kids, and I have no doubt that the kids watching this at the time just found it magical. Now, it wasn't long before we got the sequel to the first movie in 1991. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze, was released, but unfortunately it could never compare to the